Key point 1. Understand why you're reading. The idea behind reading a book is to know its contents, but that's not enough. Alongside learning the contents, you must know the author's intentions, the open messages, and the hidden ones, and why the book is talking about what it's talking about. Mortimer J. Adler and Charles Van Doren were philosophers who took their time to extensively research one of the main issues plaguing humans: reading. Their research has made it possible to understand the requirements of active reading and how you can get the best out of any book. Knowing how to read a book properly helps you understand the contents and enrich your life. There are different approaches to reading a book because there are various types of books. Applying a style used for reading a book on animals to reading a book on humans would cause a conflict of communication. The author's aim is to communicate with the reader, and once that essence is lost, the purpose of reading is defeated. The first step to fixing a problem is identifying it. Are you scared or confused as to how to approach a book? Does it bother you that you're finding it hard to understand a book you've read or you're currently reading? You're not alone, and that's why this tidbit is recommended for you. Key point 2. Reading is crucial even in the modern era. The media, radio and television, are doing exceptionally well in broadcasting news and information, but they still can't be compared to reading. The media carefully chooses their selected agenda and creates propaganda written to control the reader. In essence, the media causes people to form opinions with the way they report news. As a reader, you must be active because even though you are a reader, you're a listener as well. You must move from the stage of understanding less to understanding more by challenging the power of your mind to comprehend the symbols written in a book. The primary purposes of reading include information gathering and understanding. The methods of learning by instruction and learning by discovery also help the reader comprehend. When you recall something from a book, you have learned it. But when you understand what you've learned from that book, then you're enlightened. The 4 levels of reading help you become an active and demanding reader. Identify your goals before reading a book. What do you want to get out of it? It will affect how deeply you explore the content. There are 4 reading levels. Elementary reading. This level of reading is the one that moves the reader from non-literary to literary. It's a child's earliest form of reading where they have to first understand the words on a page. At this stage, the reader's not concerned about meaning. They first must learn speech production and sentence structure. Inspectional reading. This level deals with time. Here, the reader is given time to complete a book or a page. Through this, their accuracy improves, and they learn the meanings of words more clearly. Analytical reading. Analytical reading is thorough and complete. The reader must take the time to really read the book and ask questions. Syntopical reading. This is the most complex of all reading levels. It tasks its reader and makes comprehensive demands in terms of effectiveness and efficiency. Here, the reader reads many books to expand their knowledge on any given subject. Syntopical reading stands as the most beneficial form of reading, as it aids in gaining a comprehensive understanding of the topic. Key point 3. Being an active reader requires you to stay awake. Some books bore you to sleep, but you must remain awake when you have a goal to achieve with your reading. When you are reading actively, it means you're making an effort towards something, and unless you train yourself to be awake, you'll always nod off when reading. When reading any book, there are 4 essential questions you need to consider. They are: what is the overall theme and style of the book? This involves understanding the central theme and the author's manner of expression. What's the message here? It's important to grasp the main ideas and the author's perspective. How much of the book is true, either partially or entirely? it's not sufficient to just comprehend the author's thoughts. You must form opinions of your own, and this is only possible when you understand the book. And what of it? It's essential to analyze the book's importance and the author's underlying purpose. These steps help you know if you need to read more to understand or if the book has enlightened you enough. The person who says he knows what he thinks but cannot express it usually does not know what he thinks. Mortimer J. Adler, Charles Van Doren. One of the most effective ways of reading a book is by writing in it. You get full ownership of a book when you're able to communicate with the author. Writing in your book with a pencil helps keep you awake, and it serves as a jot pad for you to go back to later. Some of the ways you can intelligently mark a book are highlighting key passages, drawing vertical lines alongside significant sections, placing an asterisk next to important points, making notes or comments in the margins, noting related page numbers in the margin, and circling keywords. Key point 4. The power of analytical reading. Several rules guide analytical reading. The first principle emphasizes the importance of identifying the type of book you are reading right from the beginning. It's crucial to classify books before you read them. Classification of books gives you a prepared knowledge of the kind of message you'll receive from the book. To classify a book, you must pay attention to the title, subtitle, table of contents, preface or introduction, and the author's note. The title of a book tells a lot about the book's content, but because people don't bother to classify books, the title becomes irrelevant. Books can be grouped into practical and theoretical genres. Practical books are books that talk extensively about things that work and are useful. They are guidebooks that outline and explain how to do something and why you should. On the other hand, theoretical books explain academic subjects like science, history, and philosophy. Once you're able to classify books correctly, you'll have an idea of what to expect based on the few things you know about the book already. As an analytical reader, your goal is to uncover the underlying meanings and messages within a book. The second rule of analytical reading dictates that you write out a preview of the entire book in one sentence or a few sentences at most. The way to formulate a short and precise summary of the book is by deciphering the central theme and finding out what makes it a whole book. You should also identify how the author has been able to flow with their words. The third rule states identifying the book's major parts and showing how they all fit together as a whole. This means that you should detail the major components in order and outline them the same way you have outlined the book. To find the hidden meanings, find a way to understand the author's problems and try to solve them. Rule 4 states, find out what the author's problems were. Key point 5. The writer and the reader must establish a connection. To fully understand and connect with the contents of a book, the writer must come to terms with the reader, and vice versa. The fifth rule of analytical reading is finding the important words and using them to come to terms with the author. If the reader and the author fail to connect, the purpose of communication in the book is defeated. The author's message should make sense to you only when you've established a connection. To do this, you must find the key words, technical words, and special words. You also need to find the meanings of the words you have highlighted to give you more understanding. Your comprehension of a book will deepen the moment you make the effort of finding the key words and deeper meanings. This shows you've come to terms with the author, and that's a huge step towards understanding how to read a book. By dividing a book into the processes of outlining and interpretation, you can say that you've been able to determine the actual message of the author. The sixth rule of analytical reading is marking the most important sentences in a book and discovering the proposition they contain. And Rule 7 implies that you should focus on understanding the core arguments or key points and examining how ideas are linked and developed throughout the text. The idea is to look beyond individual sentences and understand the flow of arguments or ideas by seeing how they connect and build upon each other. Rule 6 and 7 emphasize the importance of knowing the author's intent with the book, the message the author wants to pass across, and why it's important for developing your reading skills. So it's imperative that you locate the most important sentences in the book. But how to do this? Firstly, if you find it difficult to understand some sentences you come across, those sentences are likely talking about the author's intent. Secondly, some authors help you point these sentences out by highlighting them with question marks. After finding these sentences, the next stage is to find their propositions, their meanings. When you've discovered the meanings, then you move on to finding the author's argument. You can know about the author's argument by finding it in the sequential arrangement of his sentences. Once you've found the arguments, you proceed to uncover the solutions to the argument. But it's essential to discern which issues the author has successfully addressed and which ones remain unsolved. This brings about rule number 8, which states, find out what the author's solutions are. Key point 6. How to criticize a book. In many cases, the author is far above the reader in terms of experience and expertise, so it might seem unfair to criticize the author's work. But there's no book too good to be criticized. When the author lays down their points in the book, they invite the reader to communicate with them, which is done through criticism. Regardless of the author's pedigree, as long as the reader is polite in his evaluations, criticism is very much welcomed and appropriate. As much as you're a responsive reader, you must also be a responsible reader. This means that you must always take a position that is yours and not the author's. It's important to reiterate that your position can only be valued if you've taken the effort to understand what the book is talking about comprehensively. Hence, you have to suspend your judgment about a book until you're satisfied you thoroughly understand it. There's no point in winning an argument in which you are wrong or have inadequate information. Personal experiences or events don't determine the authenticity of a book. So for every critical judgment you make, you must outline and demonstrate that you're capable of discerning between personal opinion and stated knowledge. You must be able to separate facts from bias and intuition from data. For every judgment you make, you must create a critical analysis that supports your claim and understand why you agree with the author or not. Criticism isn't limited to finding the faults in a book or tearing the author apart. It goes beyond pointing out the mistakes of the author in a book. To effectively criticize a book, you must understand the following points. Point out where the author is misinformed. Point out where the author is uninformed. Point out where the author is illogical, and show where the author's analysis is incomplete or inadequate. Did you know? When it comes to criticizing an author's work, the rule is to always approach a book like a lively and constructive problem-solving session with a friend. Start the book with an open mind and a good intent, and ensure you can state the author's arguments better than they can before weighing in with your own. Key point 7. Practical books explain what you need to do and how to do it. Practical books are guidebooks that provide solutions. A book about making friends cannot solve problems that concern earning a living. It might give some ideas, but unless you have a book that comprehensively talks about making a living, you won't get any help. Here's how you can effectively read books on some practical fields of study. Imaginative literature. First, approach the works of imaginative literature with an open mind. You don't necessarily have to make it define you, but don't be too rigid in letting it possess you. Secondly, don't look for propositions in imaginative literature. Since imaginative literature is not about empirical data and factual statistics, it's not essential to look for meanings. Lastly, don't allow personal bias to cloud your judgment. The most important words are those that give you trouble. It's likely that these words are important for the author as well. Mortimer J. Adler, Charles Van Doren. History. History is a broad field that is unique in itself. It can be studied as facts or as a written record of facts. The key to reading history is to understand the theories of history. You must be aware of how universal the history of the book you're reading is and what kind of history you're reading. Science and mathematics. The field of science and mathematics is one of the most popular and fast-growing in the world. Reading science and mathematics content is easier for people who have studied well in that field. These books are practical, which means they're written in levels. A book can never talk about everything in mathematics and science. You have to read supplemental books as well. It would help if you tried to study mathematics as a language, which means you must start on an elementary level. A rudimentary understanding will make it relatively easy for you to read books on mathematics and science. Conclusion. The way you read a book determines how well you'll understand it. Your manner of approach and your commitment toward reading well gives you deep insight into the book and the author's message. Your perception of a book results from how you read it, which is why it's advisable to follow the guidelines outlined in this summary. Reading is an active task, so just as the author or speaker must put in some effort to pass the message across, the reader or listener must also make an effort to receive what is being sent. The more active you are while reading material, the more you understand it. The initial step in active reading is to engage with it as if it's a dialogue between you and the author. Pick up every book you read with an open mind and never forget that books are the flawed creations of imperfect creatures. Don't treat everything you read as fixed statements of fact. Understanding is a two-way operation. As a reader, you must question yourself and the author and be willing to argue with the author once you understand what they're saying. The essence of good reading can never be overlooked. Good reading broadens the horizon and teaches you more. So, to enjoy a book, you must first enjoy reading it. Efficient reading causes growth, which is why you should make a conscious effort to read well. Try this. Classify your books before you read them to help focus your mind. Take notes as you read and question the author's arguments. Then, draw your conclusions without using personal bias. And remember, activity is the essence of good reading. The more active you are, the better.